Welcome to the Two Grumpy Bastards podcast, where feelings aren't felt and snowflakes melt. Buckle up, it's gonna be a bumpy ride.
They painted over ants.
All right, so we're just going to do an impromptu Coop's Cold Hard Facts, and we're going to talk about what this really is, Russ. Because in my opinion, this goes way beyond anything that's about personality or Trump or anything else. We're seeing the culmination of a long game, in my opinion, Russ. We're looking at basically a playbook. This is the playbook of leftism at its finest. So, folks, we'll talk through this for podcast only, folks. We'll have this up as a separate video and on the video. But let's take a look at the leftist playbook and tell me, Russ, and tell me folks at home or listening to this in your cars or in the park or wherever you're at in your hot yoga class and your hot yoga pants. I can only dream, right? That we have people doing that listening to our podcast. Tell me if this doesn't remind you of some things that might be going on. So, leftist playbook. And I'm sorry to read the slides, but I'm doing this for the podcast, folks. Infiltrate and assimilate influential non-governmental institutions, such as the education, media, and entertainment systems. I think we're there. We've been on a slow slide of this.
Been there for a while.
Been there for a while, we've been on a very large slide of this since the 1960s. Certainly, Hollywood before that was in that direction, but certainly in the education and media. Allow passive invasion to create dependence in a large voting base. We have an wide open border. We've had a shit border forever. It got better under the Trump administration. But what we are facing, Russ, and please tell me if I'm wrong with this, is we've allowed basically, and not even passive, I think that's the wrong word to use. It's been an invasion.
Yeah, well, as Dinesh D'Souza pointed out, immigration without assimilation is invasion.
Yeah, he did say that. I try not to quote him too much, but he's right. He's right. Create dependent and victimized lower class and minority population. Oh my goodness. Corolla famously says, I guess we have no more problems when we call certain things racism in this country, but I thought we got away from that for a while because things got a lot better.
We did until Obama was elected.
Race is everything. Sexuality is everything. We have a dependent, victimized lower class, and the young people that have grown up with this atmosphere in the Obama administration, now Biden administration, have bought into this. That everybody.
Real quick, a lot of folks, when we elected Barack Obama, some folks breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Okay, we've elected an African American president. We are past our racism. We can move past it." However, I believe Barack Obama very cynically used our inflamed passions to intentionally make race relations worse, to divide so that he could use a victimized mentality among some to keep him in power. Because when people feel like victims, they will look for those who will advocate or fight on their behalf as victims. And so it's much easier to control people when they think that they are being taken advantage of.
I'd encourage anybody to look at the writings and videos of Thomas Sowell in particular. And even folks like who's more media culture, Larry Elder, some of the Black leaders in the community who speak on this very behalf, that they've been duped, that they've allowed themselves to be controlled and victimized, and that the left, the rich white guilty liberals are, I'm just going to say it, are the new plantation owners. They are the modern plantation owners in this country. They really are. In every sense of the emotional and spiritual and financial world, they are. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and it's the problem is that, well, not the problem. A problem is that, like you mentioned, everything is being labeled as racist or sexist or bigoted, which means that it loses any sting it ever had. I don't know if you saw the headline. I believe it was in The Atlantic, which talked about Hispanics in the country, and it said the rising minority voices of white supremacy. And I'm like, I was baffled. I'm like, this makes no sense that you're labeling Hispanics and Black conservatives and even Asians based on the affirmative action cases that are coming up as voices of white supremacy.
It's insane.
Because yeah, they've used that label though, because ever since I was a kid, the worst thing you could possibly be labeled was a racist. And so they've used it to try to club and shame people into compliance, but it's just gone on so long now that it no longer has any power, because people are like, well, you're going to call me racist no matter what I do.
Absolutely. I hit a couple more planks real quick to get through this on the leftist playbook. Deny all objective morality and truth. Attack institutions such as faith, church, and traditional family.
That's in effect.
Has been for a while, and it's completely in effect now. I saw something on Facebook today earlier where I guess there was a drag show fairly locally, and there was out in the public at a public park in a town that's about 20 minutes from here, and everybody's there. Well, you should have to be 18 plus to go to church. I love who we've become as a country. Oh, far more kids are molested by the public education system than by the church, by the way. So why doesn't that apply to
it? Doesn't get the publicity, so people think it's not happening.
Yeah, exactly. Censor rational thought and dissent. Right out of the leftist playbook, right out of it. Gee, folks, is that happening in this country? What do you think, Russ?
I don't know. Boys are girls, girls are boys. It's being censored to say that biological sex means something. We've talked about dissent. I remember I don't remember the guy's name, but from Mumford and Sons, who promoted Andy No's book on Antifa, was kicked out of his band and canceled.
Yep.
There's the pitcher for the Toronto Blue Jays who re-emphasized the lesson: never apologize to the mob, because he said something supporting people of faith and thoughts about Pride Month, and he got such pressure he apologized for it, and then he came out on the field and got booed by the fans, and the Toronto Blue Jays cut him.
Amazing.
Dissent is not allowed, because dissent is seen as an attack on someone's person, not on someone's ideas. I don't know if you've watched recently a guy I've become a real big fan of named Konstantin Kisin.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Absolutely.
He brought up, and I didn't know this, but he brought up that the term politically correct originally came out of the Soviet Union. It wasn't about protecting people's feelings. It was a way of saying, well, what you're saying is right, but we don't like hearing it.
Right.
And it was politically incorrect in the Soviet Union to bring stuff up, and he's horrified to see that being imported over the West. One last thought on the censoring rational thought, and this is again another stat from Mr. Kisin. It hasn't happened in the United States yet, although I think folks are going to try to bring it here. All right, first of all, do you know how many folks in Russia were jailed for what they posted on social media a couple years ago?
I have no, I do not.
About 400. Do you know how many people in Britain were jailed during the same year for what they posted on social media?
No.
Roughly 3,300.
Oh my God.
Over 8 times the number of people that were imprisoned in Russia were imprisoned in Britain based on what they said on social media. Including
God, my God.
Yeah, including people. I mean, again, it's one of the reasons we have guns, is to stop the government from trying to censor what you can say.
You know, I was listening to did you listen to the recent I don't know if it was Shapiro but when they were doing the 1 anniversary of Matt Walsh's What is a Woman documentary?
I am aware of that, and yeah, I mean, it took Elon Musk himself, the billionaire head of Twitter, to step in and stop the activist minions from actively censoring that broadcast. One of the
there was the horrible thing about listening to that podcast that was reviewing it. They were interviewing what they called a bunch of heroes from the documentary, which is a huge documentary, by the way, and it is available on Twitter. But the bad thing about it is it was emceed by Michael Knowles, who I can't stand. So that was bitter fruit for me to listen to that particular pod. But the guy that's one of the heroes of that is a Canadian who refused to call his transitioning daughter he by the personal pronouns, and has already spent 6 months in jail and is facing trial for an additional 3 months in jail. Literally got jailed for not using the proper pronouns. That's an actual true story, black and white, in Canada. That has happened.
Yeah, in Canada, that's one of the things that Jordan Peterson has been fighting against is the the compelled use of pronouns. Now they're not saying here's something you can't say. They're saying here's something you have to say.
Yep.
And so compulsion of speech is a very nasty, authoritarian thing to do.
That's what
it's why I'm
elevated.
hoping eventually Pierre, I think his name is Pierre Poliver, I believe is his name. I don't remember exactly. But the opposition leader in Canada needs to come to power in Canada and undo what Justin Trudeau has done, because Justin Trudeau has made Canada, it's not good.
He's a fascist. He's a fascist leader up there. He's a fascist. Period.
Yep.
Let me get to the last couple of bullets here. Groom the children, and by that I don't even mean necessarily what we talk about grooming for transgender, but I mean literally groom the children for leftist thought.
Indoctrination, which happens through the education, entertainment, and the media.
Absolutely. And then last but not least, lock up the opponents and dissenters, which happened in every single culture, leftist fascist culture that we can my God, under the Stalin, under Hitler, and much horrible things, worse than that. Not just lock them up, but literally commit genocide against dissenters and opponents, have them murdered, have them assassinated. But we'll just leave it at lock up the opponents. So I don't know about you, my friend, but I'm looking at this list, which fits very, very well with a lot of historical leftist ideology, strategy, playbook. But really, when we get down to it, Russ, who does this sound like in history? Well, it definitely sounds like that guy. We're looking at a picture of Mr. Stalin himself. It definitely looks like that guy who everybody reveres as the worst dictator in history, which I would argue the guy to his left or anatomical right of the slide in many ways committed higher atrocity numbers. It also looks like these guys.
Yeah.
We're talking the fucking Borg here in this country is in charge, Russ. I'm
thinking of Picard's speech on the Borg ship where he says, where they shout out, freedom is irrelevant, self-determination is irrelevant, you must comply.
Exactly. So like I like to say, boom, you're welcome. So we brought it back around with that last bullet there. Hi, here I am. Brought it back around to that last bullet there with jail your opponents. So this just hit me really, really strongly. It's not that I didn't always believe this or see it, but I'm 100% in now, Russ, on the fact that this is just the long game. This is the last step in the long game where they are so confident. They are so embedded in so many institutions in this country. Now they think they can do what they want to. And I'll just quickly say this before you get on to your worst case scenario analysis, is that there are many people, many presidents who've done things that probably were against the law or were shady immorally or any of those kind of things. There is a precedent for not indicting these people. There's a precedent set for that for some very important reasons to keep the democracy intact. We're looking at one of them. You're looking at the front runner for the Republican primary and probably the general election. And these indictments, look, regardless of the facts of the situation, and we'll see how that comes out, the fact that Hillary Clinton was not indicted and Comey basically said, I'm not going to do it. Joe Biden, the sitting president, also had classified documents, I guess because he had a cool Corvette sitting in the foreground that he's getting away with it. I don't know the nature. I've seen some things about battle plans and some other things. Notice they didn't talk about the type of documents that Joe Biden had. They didn't talk about what was in those documents. That was not leaked to the media, unlike the Trump stuff. So this is a political power play. This follows in line with exactly what if you went to school, if you went to get a graduate degree in how to be a fascist leftist dictator, here's what you do. This is that last step. So anyway, I just want to put that out there. I know we wanted to talk about the leftist manifesto for a while now, and I thought I'd throw it in because it seemed kind of appropriate here because I'll talk about it later. I'm all in on this. There's no more tinfoil hat. There's no more conspiracy theories. I'm not talking about drugs. Okay. I'm not that guy. This is reality. This is stuff that has happened and that we're dealing with now. And us nice, try to get along, complacent people that are conservative and like to preserve things and care about tradition stuff. We've been sitting on our fucking hands too long. Period. Go ahead, Russ.
Well, first of all, to kind of augment off of that, I often hear friends of mine, whether they're on the left or not quite that far on the left, bemoan, hey, Republicans need to nominate more moderate candidates. What I've discovered that really means is Republicans need to nominate non-confrontational candidates. The Bob Doles, the John McCains, the Mitt Romneys. We've done that. It's gotten us nowhere. Those candidates cannot win a Republican primary any longer. You have shown us that they get nowhere. So that's why you're going to get the Trumps. You're going to get the DeSantises. You're probably, down the line, you may get the Winston Sears. You may get the Josh Hawleys or the Tom Cottons. But you're going to get the confrontational Republicans from here on out. That's just what's going to happen. Now, on my most likely scenario, here's what's most likely to happen. Whether it's in 2024, because by some miracle Trump doesn't win the GOP nomination and DeSantis wins it, or 2028, which is the outside of where the 6 years from now is the outside limit of where this all begins. A Republican's going to take back the White House at some point. In 2028, I think the Republicans will walk into the White House because their economy will be just complete shit. And things will be completely out of control. I'm not sure Biden will still be around. I'm not hoping for anything to happen there, but he is 80. He'll be 82 at the time of the next election. His faculties aren't all there to begin with, and Kamala Harris may be in charge, but let's just say Biden is still in charge at that point. But the Republicans will walk into the White House in 2028, I believe, if they don't in 2024. And here's what happens then. Biden will be indicted, or another high-profile Democrat. This could have been avoided, to go back to your previous point, had they actually indicted Hillary Clinton. And regarding either her or Joe Biden's documents, people were like, well, they don't have that much and they didn't mean to do it. Well, first of all, Hillary bleach bit her computer. That demonstrates intent. But regardless of that, you and I both understand the National Security Act fairly well, having handled classified material ourselves. Intent is not part of the crime when it comes to mishandling of classified information. It's just not. So people saying, well, they didn't mean to do it and they didn't leak that much, it doesn't matter. Mishandling classified information is mishandling classified information.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not indicting her set a precedent. I've been talking to some folks like, well, we need to uphold the standard and indict everybody. I'm like, well, that's great, but I'm not going to be the only one playing in the sandbox. A standard that's only applied to one side is a standard that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So what happens next is the next Republican president will indict Biden and or several high-profile Democrats. I don't know if you saw Jennifer Granholm has just admitted to Jennifer Granholm, for those who don't know, she's the Secretary of Energy. She just admitted to lying under oath to Congress that, oops, yeah, I did own individual stocks that may create a conflict of interest, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so the next Republican, and I've run folks who said, well, DeSantis, the next Republican wouldn't do that. It would be beneath them. No, imagine Ron DeSantis appoints, I don't know, Ted Cruz as Attorney General. You're going to sit there and tell me that Ted Cruz is not going to seek the indictment of Joe Biden? What's his downside?
Dude, I may have, what, a little in my pants thinking about Ted Cruz as the Attorney General. I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
I know, but there's no downside for him. He indicts Biden or whoever, and he can indict Biden on the mishandling of classified information. He can indict Biden on the bribery stuff that's been coming out regarding the shell companies. I mean, he could take his pick. It solidifies his credibility with the base. And it boosts him to the moon when he wants to run. So that's going to happen. After that, a Democrat will then indict his Republican predecessor. And the Republican will indict the Democrat. And it's going to go until this entire system is just going to collapse. That's why I say a civil war, in my opinion, is inevitable at this point, because it's going to become, Democrats, mostly, not all of them, there are a few rational ones that understood this, but for the most part, they didn't understand in 2014 or 13, that nuking the judicial filibuster was going to come back to bite them in the ass.
Right.
Because they thought they had a permanent lock on at least the Senate, if not, majorities in Congress. Well, let's ask Justice Amy Coney Barrett how that worked out for the Democrats.
Right.
It's going to be a tit for tat. The next Republican is going to be under immense pressure from the Republican base to indict Biden. and or other high-profile Democrats who they're going to scream and holler about it, and then they're going to do it in return, and so on and so forth. And whether it starts out with a bang or it starts out slowly, that is where it's going to lead to civil war. Now, we could talk about the explosion and quick burn, or we can talk about a long, drawn-out, conflict, tit-for-tat conflict, low intensity versus high intensity. I don't know which way that goes, but it's going to go one of those ways because people are we're at an all-time polarized high. People are not going to just take it anymore. Republicans have tried taking it for a while, and they've seen it's gotten them nowhere. So I think that that's the most likely scenario. At what point it actually collapses and people start taking extra legal action. I don't mean, extra action within the legal system. I mean like extra legal action. I don't know. And again, please understand, I am not advocating for this. God, I hope I'm wrong. I am simply making a prediction based on observation and my analysis of the American political scene. I think it's over. People have tried telling me, well, Rome collapsed after a while. Rome didn't collapse till it was an empire. And it didn't even fall under Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, when he crossed the Rubicon after taking on Pompey from the first triumvirate, and then taking Rome itself, that wasn't the fall of the Republic. The fall of the Republic was when his nephew Octavian took over and became Augustus Caesar. And so I see some kind of slide. I don't know which way it goes. I don't know how people react. I think most people will simply go about, hey, as long as you're not bothering me. But what a lot of folks don't understand is they're like, well, 50% versus 50%, we're not going to do that. It doesn't take that. It really doesn't. The American Revolution was precipitated by 15% of the populace.
Mm-hmm.
During the Civil War, between 5 and 6% of the Southern populace held slaves. It doesn't take a large percentage to make this whole thing go up in flames. And people who are poo-pooing it, they just don't get it. I mean, my friends on the left who are saying the right would never do that, they're not engaged with conservative commentariat the way I am. All right. And I'm talking about, I just observe, I just read what people are saying. Yeah, the average person griping might not necessarily start something, but all it takes is a small amount of folks to actually push it, and then those who are talking will join. And that's where it's going to get dangerous. That's where we're going to learn how the rest of the world, for the majority of human history, has resolved political conflicts.
You bring up some really good points too, and I used to hit on this really hard when you and I worked together. I taught a very popular course in American military history, and I concentrated a lot on some of our ex-students and fine officers. Probably remember that I beat up on the American Revolutionary period a lot. I kind of consider it my area of emphasis and expertise. And the reason being because there was so much there, not just trying to fan or be jingoistic about the American values, which I was doing openly. But there's so much to learn from that period of history. And you bring up a wonderful point that a lot of people don't realize that the patriotic fervor in the colonies was a small little kernel. Really, James Otis, who doesn't get any credit, was one of the great founders of the of that kind of thought, of that libertarian thought that led to that. But he was schizophrenic and went nutty before the Continental Congress, so he doesn't get a lot of due course because insane people didn't really get the compassion back then. But he was a fantastic thinker, and it was a very small minority of the future Americans who really believed in the revolt and believed in the pushback. By far and away, the majority of Americans were either loyalists to King George or outright Tories who openly helped the British troops and believed, and it's understandable. We're the children of Great Britain, and everything, all of the wealth and everything else. We had all the natural resources, yes, but all the protection and wealth and all that kind of thing came from Great Britain. But what happened was, George Washington fought a freaking a retreat, a retrograde operation for the first couple of years of the Revolutionary War, in hopes that he would have an opportunity, and his opportunity came, at Trenton, and he won one battle that was because the Germans were drunk, and that turned
and did not listen to the one guy who brought him news that the Americans were going to attack.
Right, the Tory farmer who gave the slip to some German or Hessian officer. They weren't really Germans technically, who they were mercenaries, and who gave it to Colonel Rowell, who Colonel Rowell stuffed it in his pocket and didn't read the note that the Americans were coming to invade. Instead, got drunk, and the Americans won. That battle changed everything. Now in the South, people don't realize there was this whole nother campaign going on in the South. Nathan Allen and his Green Mountain, all that stuff going on down there. Now the South, we were kind of kicking their ass because the Southern boys were always kind of good at stuff. But that battle was in the North, of course, New York, Boston. That's where it was going to determine the war. We fought this retrograde operation where George Washington got his ass kicked for a couple of years, all the way into the White Plains, New York, and
he lost 6 of his 9 battles he fought.
Yep, and but he was fighting a retrograde operation, and he was doing the guerrilla stuff, hitting them where they live in their logistics areas and stuff like that. But that once he won a battle, and they considered it a major battle, although you could argue that, things changed. Things began to sway. It's like, oh, we can beat these British, or we can beat the Hessians. And the Hessians at the time had the reputation for being one of the most lethal, horrible, fighting forces in the world. They were specifically conscripted and hired out to different armies in the world because they were considered such badasses. Okay. Well, he beat the Hessians. Yeah, the details probably weren't really well known, that it was Christmas Eve or Christmas morning and they were all drunk in their beds. But hey, that, good tactics. Here's the thing. It takes a spark. And when that spark hits home, it hits, the fire of patriotic fervor. That's what's going to matter. Here's what I think, philosophically speaking. I'd like to get your take on this because I think about this stuff a lot, especially being a military historian. I don't believe there's a lot of, how can I say this? There's not a lot of foundation and true core values on the other side as far as the left's philosophy. They're just against shit. The left really hates things like conservatism because it reminds them of things that are bigger than them. Conservatism implies that you want to preserve certain things, heritage and tradition and protocol and ritual, that there are things more important than your own individual thoughts and lives, like our belief in God, our belief in the Constitution, our belief in country. Okay. The left to me is a bunch of angry people who hate daddy. And daddy in this case is those traditions that have built this country from the ground up. Like I like to say, you're fucking welcome, all of you people out there bitching about the patriarchy and everything else, for those roads you're traveling on, for those cars you enjoy, for those fucking iPhones, for those computers, for all that. You're fucking welcome. Brought to you by the patriarchy. You're welcome. But there is that, like, atheism in its most grotesque form. I don't have a problem with my friends that have doubts or that are agnostic, or even some of them that say, I just can't believe because of all the. Now, I do have a lot of great talking points. I'd love to have a discussion why I think I can argue against all that. But the people that adopt atheism as a religion are no different than somebody who's very religious. Okay, you have your religion, you have your church, you have your anti-church, and I have mine. I really like mine because mine's positive, and that sandal-wearing Jew told me to do some really cool things. But I really believe that all of the fervor, that spark, that fire in the belly is not on the left. It's on the right. Whether you are doing it for God or you for country or for this ideal, what is the ideal on the left? That we want Dylan Mulvaney to dance in front of the cameras and be on a fucking Bud Light can? That we want to chop off the dicks of little boys because, I mean, what? That we want the right, my body, my choice. That's not an ideal. That's not an ideal. That's an excuse. Okay, that's angry. That's pushback. And I'm sorry. I am done fucking apologizing for being a Christian, for being a fucking libertarian, for being a patriot. Nationalism is not a bad thing, ladies and gentlemen, because this country happens to have an ideal that's better than every other thing that's ever been tried in history. And I can't see it getting any better philosophically with some other system. And these people don't want a new system. They want to recycle the old system. Yet they want to have this socialism, but they want all their individual egotistical narcissist bullshit rolled into it. You can't have both, by the way. It doesn't exist. It's a paradox, you dumb fucks. Your idealism that you think you have is a paradox. You're idiots and you're narcissists. And you just hate things that are true. You hate truth. That's it. You're no different than that teenage kid who's rebelling against the parents. They know the parents are right, and they don't have any good arguments about it. So they're just going to get on the floor and fucking spin around in a circle and yell and kick their legs. Guess what? On the other side, you have idealism. And idealism will win every fucking time in history. It will. Thank you. Soapbox. I'm getting off of it now.